Hello and welcome to Chit Chat with two T's. I am your host, counseling psychologist, jvaldez. And as usual, we will be having discussions to help normalize mental health. And today with me is, I know you're all probably tired of me saying this by now, but I have another extra special guest, but she's really special. She's extra special. Okay. Yes. My god sister, Dr. Kemba Noel-London, or as I like to call her, KC. Hi, KC. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
But of course, it's been a work in progress for quite some time to get you here. So happy that you're actually here.
Yeah.
And of course, as I saw in his credits, producer dude. Is that what you're calling yourself now?
Yeah, listen, until we figure out exactly what it is, I'll just keep making up stuff. Who knows what I'll be this episode.
I am here to follow this. Like, I'm just gonna keep watching the credits now.
Co-creator. Yeah, that's what you have to do. It's like a Marvel movie. You have to watch it.
Exactly.
Anyway, and so Ricardo Mitchell, happy to have you with us as well. Right. So we're going to get into it, and I'm going to tell you all what's in my cup. But before I do that, I want Casey to tell us a little bit about herself. So again, more suspense.
Do you want okay, I'm trying to figure out where to start. So I am a social epidemiologist and a athletic trainer, as well as a health equity researcher. So those are the three things that I put on my business card because I
don't think they could fit.
It's just 3 lines, right? So it's just 3 lines and it fits.
With a lot of syllables.
With a lot of syllables, but it works, right? So that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis, i.e. I do too much all the time. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. So I look at the social drivers and social causes of disease that also stems into, well, in the context of the United States, I would say, goes into policy and all that kind of thing as well. And because of my background as being a former national athlete as well,
whoop, whoop.
for Trinidad and Tobago in volleyball, that's how I ended up in sports medicine. So then when I was getting my PhD, it just kind of made sense to kind of look at that intersection of public health and sports medicine, because practicing as an athletic trainer, physio in Trinidad, there were a lot of questions that I was raising about the way that we do sports medicine, about the way that we run our healthcare system. There were a lot of things that I was just like, why are we doing this? This don't make no sense from like a practical
because that's how we've always done it.
Right. And it's fascinating when you get into the research, because as a class project, not my dissertation, I proposed for one of my classes, like a potential reform to the Trinidad and Tobago healthcare system, right? Looking at other healthcare systems across the world and try to figure out, okay, what could potentially work. And there isn't a lot of research or documents that I was able to find on the last time we had a reform for our healthcare system. So,
yes, for Minister of Health.
Oh God, Lord, no! You see how fast Barack Obama aged in them 8 years that he was there? Listen, I like not having gray hair. I just stress out when I find a little patch and he said, no, I could consult and I could advise for sure. But not Minister of Health. However, I do agree that I wish we would culturally get away from this idea that doctors are designed and meant to lead healthcare systems.
Yes.
Because that is not necessarily the case, right? Just because you have an MD don't naturally make you a leader, don't naturally make you in charge to understand how should healthcare systems work and also how to reform them, right? That's a whole degree and training within itself. It's the idea of why are we giving people scholarships to go abroad and learn things if we're not going to utilize the knowledge that they're getting, right? So that's my little soapbox.
Did I mention she bright? Because she bright.
Only some days.
We're gonna hear more about that in a bit. But first I wanted to share with you, before I ask Casey, I wanted to share with you what's in my cup. So this is my very sexy tumbler given to me by my good friend Louise. Hey, Mrs. Huggins, how you doing, girl? I was her maid of honor, and this was in our very fancy schmancy bridesmaid box that she gave us. We each got personalized tumblers and robes and purses. So I know it was a lot. So this is my very sexy black, because black is sexy. Tumbler from her, also done by Fantasy Factory Gifts. Fantasy Factory is a friend of the show, right? And in it today, because it's been one of those days, I have water, because water is gross to me. For those of you who know me, I don't like it, but apparently you have to drink it to stay alive. So this is me ensuring I get my water intake for the day. What's in your cup, Casey?
So I have 2 cups. And in 1 cup, so this is my mug, it says hug in a mug.
Oh, do you drink a lot of chocolate or wine in there?
I don't actually like wine.
Get off the show.
Give me gin, give me tequila. But wine.
This is a true story.
Right. In this
We're not going to get into those stories, guys.
But in my cup is some Trinidad chocolate, like Trinidad hot cocoa.
Ooh!
Yeah.
From your neighbor?
No, not from a neighbor. So I know you was gonna ask, so I come prepared. So I had the packet right here, right?
What is that? Calypso spice?
Yeah. So it have 2. It have the original and have the Calypso spice, but it's from Cocoa Republic. You get in JTA, and I think Massey have it too. So yeah.
I know they're chocolate bars. I didn't know that they did drinking chocolate too. They have really good chocollet bars. Yeah. They usually, I think I see them in Superfarm. They have really good little ones.
Okay.
Okay.
I have that. And I do have chocolate from my neighbor, but I didn't drink that this time. And then in my other cup, which is this cup, is water.
What does it say on that one?
It says you are right where you are meant to be.
Oh, message. Word. Yeah.
So it's a hydration,
word
message, affirmation cup.
Truth Thursdays.
Truth Bomb Thursdays.
I love that. Truth Bomb Thursdays. That's great. And fun fact, Casey's neighbor is actually House of Arundel. So
since small.
And she never told me that he had a chocolate factory. But it's fine.
I thought Mubby told you. Sorry. Take that up with your godmother.
Okay, Auntie Liz. Get it together. Don't keep important information away from us. Yeah. So what else is going on with you? So that's what's in your cup, literally. What's in your cup figuratively? What's happening with Casey?
I think this week just felt a lot. Like that's the word I've been using. Like it just feels like it's been a lot. And it stems from like I was sick for 2 weeks.
Right.
So we rescheduled and lost my voice and all that good stuff. And then having crappy responses to antibiotics, which is never fun. So I basically lost out 2 weeks of work and productivity. And I am a person where I'm trying to reconfigure the way that I think about what productivity is and efficiency and how I spend my time and those kind of things, which is deprogramming, things that I would have had to develop going through a PhD program and also still being a clinician in St. Louis and for other teams as well. So having to lose 2 weeks and, then the week just started with a lot. And then, over the weekend, I just was sad because I'm grieving my dad still since my dad passed in June. So that kind of just hit me like a wall, and I had to just suck the tears back up in my face because I had to go cover rugby on Saturday. So I had two teams that needed me, and I needed to, this face has to be a poker face because you're severely concussed. I can't be crying while you're crying, right? Like you're supposed to be the only one crying on the field, not me.
Let me help you. I can make you better.
Why are you crying? I don't know. Sympathy tears. Right? That's not going to
It wouldn't work. Yeah.
Right? So that's in my cup at the moment. But today was a good day. And I think it's because I allowed myself to kind of just go at a pace that's reasonable, right? In the sense of, like I worked out this morning instead of this evening, and be flexible with my time and not like watch the clock in the sense of, all right, this workout needs to be done in an hour because I have to go back home to go to work. Is like, no, we have leeway and freedom to finagle things and that kind of stuff. So it actually resulted in me having a significantly more productive day, which then, so sorry.
And I guess we know how you keep on track with that productive day. You have a cuckoo clock?
I have a cuckoo clock, yeah. I have a cuckoo clock, or for extreme circumstances, I have the purge sound as my alarm. Like if it's real necessary, like if I really need to wake up, I have the purge sound.
What is that? I don't know what that is.
So, like if you watch the purge movies, the sound that it signals the start of the purge. Like Ricardo, you know what I'm talking about?
Can you play it?
I'm definitely going to add it. But if you want to play it now, I will. You sure? You sure?
Wow. Okay.
So that's for extreme measures.
The thing is, if you know Casey, none of this is surprising. It just surprised me to hear it in like real life, real time. But anyway, so your cup is pretty full.
Yes, I would say we had that, what is the scientific term for water, where it just kind of, it making
that. We learned that it's on the time, right?
Science. Yeah, like it's the viscosity of it, and it just kind of makes that thing, but
all
it's not
the time
overflowing. That's where we is.
Wow.
I don't know what it is. I can't remember. Yeah, right?
Okay, viewers, if you know what the word is, tell us, because I can't remember right now. Mm-hmm. For some reason, meniscus is that coming to my mind. I know that's not it.
That's not it.
That's... Just saying, I know big words too.
Yeah, anyway, you do. So proud of you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. What is that word? Now it's going to bother me. Anyway, we'll find it. So that is that.
Depressed.
Did you say clinically depressed?
No, season 2 is the best.
Oh, I was like clinically depressed because she has a purge. Because she has a purge alarm. Like I was like, where were we going with this? Anywho, so I mean, yes, as we were saying, your cup is pretty full. In addition to your job and living in the US is a whole thing by itself. And of course, grieving your dad. How are you? Well, I guess we'll get to that. Let me just jump ahead. But in terms of having your cup full as well, I guess there would be things that would, kind of piss you off or annoy you, which would be a great segue into our next segment, which is what spoiled your water, right? Where you get to tell me exactly that. So,
interestingly enough, like, I don't even know, because today they were just like little things.
I believe in little things.
Right? But I'm also in this space, like with the idea of everything being a lot. The desire to like not be involved with anything that does not allow me to be productive, does not, help me feel less stressed and less overwhelmed. It's been a hard pass, like just be gone. Right? So I don't really find myself engaging with things that will, piss me off per se. It mostly gets up to annoyance, and then I'll just be like, all right, cool, time to walk away from this week. So I think that's kind of where I am. I would say I did have a very fascinating conversation with my friends yesterday about the materialism of society now. So it's not something that pisses me, that obviously is not going to piss me off, but it's a little bit of a frustrating thing, especially when we talk about like the dynamics between men and women, when you have all of the like male podcasts and stuff that are coming out as well. And this value system that we are assigning to people. Mm-hmm. And at no point is it like the fundamentals of like, but do I like you like as a human? Like just the base human. Right, just the base level of like, do I actually enjoy your company and want to be around you? Like, I don't understand this idea of where you're bringing to the table. Like where, what table is this? Why do we need to have a table? We're not going somewhere. We just go sit down by this table, this whole entire relationship. Like what, why we focus on this table so much? So I think that's something that was just an interesting conversation that I had.
Indeed.
Yesterday. But for the most part, nothing this week has really pissed me off or like boiled my tea. It's just, I think I've just been too focused on trying to relieve that sense of overwhelmingness, right? Which means that I'm just hyper focused on getting things done. So, sorry.
Interessante. So not even, so when you think about your field, okay, cool. When you think about your field of all those three things that you said earlier with the plenty syllables, is there anything there that might annoy you?
Oh yeah, definitely. So many things. Depending which region we stay. We staying in the US for
you're free. You have carte blanche to what you need to do.
Yeah, for sure. So like thinking within public health, right? And we're still in a pandemic, kind of sort of in a pandemic, right?
Moving to endemic, but not
moving
really
to
there.
endemic, but then the conversations that happen, especially when we talk about the US, right, in terms of how the US healthcare system is not structured. It's really just a hodgepodge of things that we just throw, and it's like, all right, this kind of sort of work, we could keep going this way.
Let's keep it.
Let's keep going this way. And it's just fascinating to be working in the field of public health and then seeing, especially with COVID, all of the disparities that happen, the racial disparities, and then the intersectionality of that when you get down to like income and race, but then also region and that kind of thing. But it's wild that the conversations that are happening when it comes to endemicity, there's no thought of, but everybody doesn't have equal access to health care. Right? So now if there's another disease to potentially navigate, one that does hospitalize people, like if we're talking about endemicity, then we kind of have to have a conversation about the system that is also broken, right? But it's easier to not talk about the system that's broken because that is a significantly harder problem to fix that has also been so radically politicized. And I think back to like when we were in primary school and we learning about, basic human rights, all of those things. Like when you're existing in a country like that, where you come from a country like Trinidad, right? There's a disconnect that happens. And I find like sometimes it's like literally fighting part of me because I was not socialized that way, right? So it's wild to exist in a country where the idea of healthcare is seen as an option, right? And that also made a personal responsibility. With the idea of like, well, you should have a job that gives you healthcare. When it's like,
how do you not have a job that gives you healthcare?
Right? And but then there's also because that conversation is so just truncated in this, one point in time, because they just don't have that good, they don't go back, right? They don't go back to history to understand how the hell we ended up here. Exactly. Right? So it's this kind of fear of the past and this idea that you should get over the past and the past is not important. But it's like you need to understand that in order to get a better grasp of, okay, but so how did we get here? Because if you don't understand how you get here, then the decisions making forward, you're just going to be spinning top in mud, which has very much been the case, right? Even when you think about
Bomb Thursdays.
Right. So within that too is just, racial and ethnic disparities, the conversation about race and race being a social construct with very real biological consequences, right? Even that conversation is a hard one within public health because everybody didn't get the same understanding of when race actually came to be a thing in the US, right? So that is always a conversation that will get heated, and there will always be somebody that will say something stupid in the week about it. And I am just very glad that I don't have to have my camera on because my face is loud. Like I was in a meeting the other day.
Your face is loud. Your face is so loud.
I was in a meeting the other day and I asked a question, and I have two jobs. My other supervisor was like, Kemba, that's a really good question, and I'm going to mute myself so I could laugh. And she was on the floor laughing because my face was so loud at the foolishness that was being said. Like she was cackling. So it's just a reminder for me to be good about controlling my face. We'll see. Elizabeth is my mother. That's probably never going to happen.
Big up Auntie Liz one time.
What up, Auntie Liz?
Elizabeth.
I'm not saying that. I like my life. I still had to come back in she house.
Yeah. We don't make that joke with her. Yeah.
If I could briefly interject, when you said loud face, it resonated with me. I have there was a point in time where I had deadpan expression locked, and then I don't know what happened, and it's totally out the window now.
What happened?
Probably.
Big up DJ on 868 one time.
Right. And yeah, you'll meet him when we interview you, because you have already activated so many things that are going to cause us to interview you on another platform. But
okay.
Yeah, I have this loud face, right? So I generally sit for these conversations and do nothing except have expressions. And the amazing thing about it is that I've actually heard 2 or 3 people ask, why do I just sit there? Why don't I get into the conversation? And I want to use this opportunity to point out that, well, one, the reason it seems weird to have a man sit in the conversation and just listen is because a lot of people aren't used to men just sitting and listening. So I'm hoping that by setting an example of sitting in a conversation and just hearing what has to be said, we could help normalize that in conversation as well. So it would not seem weird to have a man in a room, in a conversation, just listening. And my contributions will generally be my very equally loud face. So thanks for bringing that up.
Ricardo's missed calling in life was to be, remember Olivia from Scandal, a fixer, like for politics and thing, because they hear that spin there. That is Ricardo's missed calling in life. But we're going to deal with that another time.
I didn't miss it yet. I'm waiting on Minister of Sport and Education and Health, and we know our roster. We know our whole roster.
But I mean, she don't need that. She just used words like intersectionality and endemicity, which I wasn't even aware of.
I'm looking at Finago.
Yeah.
I was like,
and she. But this is the thing about Casey, and I want to bring it back to you in terms of the duality. She deals with a lot of duality. So she will use words like that, but then she'll also have a cuckoo clock. Right? So this is the person that I know and love. But also, how has it been for you? Because you're in this field. I don't imagine there are, well, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but especially in the States and where you're based, I don't know if there is a high number of persons of color in the field, especially persons of color from a Caribbean island. How do you mesh that and your Caribbean experience, but also, because you've been away for 5 years now? 7?
5 years, yeah.
5 years?
7.
Yeah.
Why you trying to kick me out of the country, so?
I'm sorry. You've been abroad for 5 years, which is a long time. That's Form 1 to Form 5. That's a long time.
I write in CXC this year.
Exactly. That's your, so how is it for you having to operate within those contexts?
So I'm in Chicago. So Chicago is very, very, very diverse. But the rest of Illinois, not so much, right?
Not so much. I forgot you in Chicago.
Right. So Illinois is also fascinating in the sense like you have like most of the state downstate is rural, right? So then there's also I want to say cultural, but also a geographic difference when it comes to health. And then with COVID, there was an interesting look at, political affiliation with also health outcomes as well, which to me was just, this is a fun place to be, right? In terms of humanity and society. So within Chicago, like it is very diverse, and not to really say more about where I work so I don't get fired and in trouble. But I would say within general, with that, it's not the most diverse, and then it's not, when you get to that level of you are also a PhD, right? Then it's even a smaller bubble of people. And then me with my, like, as you said, duality, right? Coming from a background of sports and sports medicine. I remember when I started my degree, like people in public health had no idea
what that was,
what I could do. And when I would tell them stories of like, oh yeah, I've had to do, they're like, what? You had like a broken face? It's like, yeah, you just like stick it up and right. So it's been fascinating in that regard in terms of, you know, recognizing the lack of communication within the fields that constitute health and healthcare within the US. Navigating that as a Black woman and then a foreign Black woman is very tricky, right? The accent is always a fun thing, and I refuse. I work really hard to keep my accent because I categorically refuse.
Do they ask you if English is your first language?
Yeah, of course.
Because I used to get that all the time in school.
Yeah. Is English your first language? You speak English really well.
You speak English really well,
right. I also
passive-aggressive
in like emails and stuff, and I refuse to spell things like neighbor without a U. Right? Like I just refuse, because that it's something simple and petty and childish, but that's just my own way of
keeping the culture alive. Do it for the culture.
Well, not necessarily culture, but it's like a weird way of asserting my presence and like keeping my roots intact. Yes. Right? Like, and in the grand scheme of things, not really gonna make a dent. And they probably think like, this person is dumb. How does she have a PhD? But doesn't have a U. But I don't care because, you know, I know that it does. So I try to find ways to assert myself that way. But then also the coming with the Trinidadian perspective of having been socialized in a country where America would call like a majority minority country, right? Even though we are the global majority, but you know, still they'll view us as a majority minority country. There is a privilege that came with that so I'll describe it as my parents didn't have to, you know, raise me to be fearful of, you know, white people and that kind of stuff. They literally, their main concern was not raising, excuse my language, an asshole, right? Right. And then the other things that come with, you know, the history of Black Power movement, the role that like our you know, forefathers would have played in terms of independence with the crown and colonialism and all of those different things. Being socialized that way from a individual and then going into your Blackness identity and your Trinidadian identity is really, really powerful and helpful, because then when you come to the US, like you walk into rooms like you already belong, because that's how you were raised.
So powerful.
Right? Like we really, I think that's a Trini thing and probably a West Indian Caribbean thing as well. Like we walk into places like there's no question that I should be here.
Yes.
Right? Like I don't understand, at least for me, I've been told that, you know, I have a presence. I'm like, 5'10". I also look like an athlete, and I also just walk I walk like I have somewhere to go, and I will not see other people half of the time. But that's also because like the way that my mother raised me, she's like, you want to go do something, then go do it. Right? There's this idea of people in your way, start to push people aside and figure out a way to get it done and figure out to get to where you need to be, right? So that has been helpful in navigating this space, and it brings a different perspective when you were thinking about healthcare and also sports, right? There's a different culture of sports within the US that they themselves don't realize that they have a culture of sport that is different to the rest of the world. Like, for example, with like soccer, like we call like football, right? Like football for everybody else but this place is a sport that you could go and play in the room. Normal, right? To play football here, you have to have money. You have to have access to a field.
Yes.
They don't have savannas.
I didn't think about that.
Right? So even just a simple, like, innocuous thing of the access that we have to just play and be physically active and to be kids for a really, really long time, that's not something that minorities within the US get, and minority kids. They don't get to be kids for a really long time. They also don't have the access to play that we sometimes take for granted because we just go down the road to sweat. Normal. We don't think about it. But here, something like soccer is already racialized, and then also like matters by your income level, right? So having that experience growing up in Trinidad and then coming here to the US, it also drives my research and the work that I try to do within communities and with coaches and that kind of thing. Because to me, I'm like, this makes no sense. This is not the way that it should be, especially if we're also trying to tell the community and their parents and those kind of things that they need to be physically active. Because that don't make sense, because they can't be physically active if they're living in a place where they don't have a chance to be physically active, right? So it's bringing that outside perspective, which helps diversify the thought of how do we come up with a solution. So it's a positive, or I try to use it as a positive, because it does bring a diversity of thought when you come to problem solving and coming up with solutions as well. So,
right, great interview. I think we could just end there. Thanks. That was great. You also gave me a lot of food for thought, because obviously that would not be something I would think about, because that's not my area. And it's interesting, because I think our society is actually fast becoming, in terms of play, very Americanized, because it's all about screen time. I don't see children playing in the road like that anymore. It's very rare, or it's very few and far between.
And then the impact of the pandemic as well too. Like I think it's one of the things for me, like I'm trying to figure out how to be able to do research within Trinidad, for Trinidad as well. Because to me, I'm like, where do we collect data? Like, where does it go?
Where does it go? If it is collected,
right?
Where does it go?
And even just the education system, like my mom was a teacher for 30 years. And I remember her, when she retired, she was like, she can't go back and teach again. Like every time it comes, she's like, she can't go back and teach now because it's such a different system. And I hear, and some of her teacher friends and stuff, this emphasis on all these standardized testing. I'm like, I hope, why don't do what the US doing, because it is not working at all, right? And there are other ways to do things. So I see it too, in terms of just access to things and play and education. And then even sport, right? When we get into the wider conversation of the national sport and our national sport landscape and where we are and where we need to go and how we get in there, right? That's a wider conversation, and it also ties into healthcare and diversifying the healthcare field and all of those other things as well. So.
Yeah, because as an outsider, when I say outsider, meaning someone not involved in sports, I could never understand why we only try to really pull together this national team right before a huge tournament like World Cup, or where we have under 16s and under this and that, but there doesn't seem to be any natural progression or continuity from an outsider's standpoint.
Right. So I will say, I think it does appear that way, but there's, in some fields, that's not the case, right?
Right.
But in some sports, it is, right? And I haven't been involved in Trinidad sport, since maybe a year after I left. But even while I was there, it's just a lot of things just confused in terms of why we did things the way that we did. And then me being an athlete and then coming back and working as a clinician, I was like, this is the same stuff that I went through when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, like literally nothing had
It's just
changed.
The other day.
Right. And it's that, I would say, if anything, that is something that we would talk about it, that would boil my teeth like that, because it's coming from a sense of, we could be such a great powerhouse of sports and sport development and youth development, sport tourism. Like, we could be such a powerhouse of that industry within the Caribbean if we would get out of our own way. Like,
just get out of our own way. Yeah.
Really and truly.
Well, I guess, when you become Minister of Health, you could, or Minister of Sports and Education. Those are things that you can put forward, or when they decide to hire you to be, a very well-paid consultant. That's out there, well-paid, these are the things, hopefully, that we could plant the seeds of. I mean, I think in very small ways, certain schools, I mean, they still do try,
Mhm.
but then because primary schools, I think, are definitely more active.
Yeah.
Except, well, yeah, they are, because really, when you think about secondary school and sports, it's mostly, not saying there aren't other things, but mostly you hear about football,
Mhm.
and cricket.
Yeah, and I would say I think that's what is the public hears, but then
Yeah.
and I also know that, going to naps, that is not necessarily
Mm.
the experience of everybody else, right? But I think I can speak for naps and like the convents kind of thing. Like with
Yeah.
our generation of girls that came through secondary school then, like that volleyball scene was strong.
It
Right?
was. Yeah.
Like from Form 1 to 6, there was no question of what sport for sure I was playing. And it was a competitive, like very, very
Yeah.
competitive. And that through that avenue is how I ended up on the national team in terms of recruiting through the secondary school volleyball league, right? So there are other sports that are happening and that they do have structure and they do work and they do kind of feed the national system. But because it's not on the public for until the national team has to go somewhere, the public doesn't really actively think about what's the process that's happening
Sports
in
is
the
the back
background.
page. It literally is the back page of the paper.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So then even the ability to really support secondary schools, and then I know people who are doing work within the secondary schools and doing really good work in terms of trying to push sport and physical activity and that kind of thing. It's to have a conversation with them to be like, okay, what do you need? Like, how do we support you in order to keep this work going? And there might also be programs that are happening, but again, that conversation that's happening on the background of the people who's doing the work isn't on the public radar because we don't care until they either win something or they lose, right?
Pretty much.
That's the only time that the wider Trinidad public cares about sport. So
and that is, to quote you, a lot. And so bringing it back to the beginning when I kind of jumped ahead, because it's so much a lotness. How is your mental health? How are you managing all of this a lotness?
I would say a day. Like that's what it's been this week, right? So it's been a solid I am okay. Like it's not good, it's literally just a strong middle of the road. But today definitely edging towards good or great, right? Because it's just
because of this podcast.
Because of this, definitely. I literally structured my day around this. I'm not gonna lie. That's why I work out the body.
Doc.
Like I structured my day around this. Y'all are important to me. Yes. So so it's stuff like this and being able to have conversations with y'all and music is a way that for me, like I decompress and it also helps me focus. And then also just dancing around my apartment is it's how I manage and navigate through mental health. And then I'm trying to do a lot better about actually talking, right? Versus sitting in myself and being like, this doesn't feel like I'm okay. I will actively tell people I'm not okay. Like I messaged one of my best friends at the beginning of the week, like, I want to go to a cabin and cry. Right? So that's how we started.
Crying cabin should be a thing.
Right? I think so. Like it's a solid Airbnb idea, crying cabin. Like you want to get away from everybody, go cry. Come cry.
Go with your gin, your tequila, and
where
wine.
Do you need?
And chocolate and cry.
Cry in the cabin. Right?
I like it. Let's do it.
Right. And be away from society. So that's kind of how I've been managing, just kind of being more open and honest. And therapy is very, very helpful.
Say it again, sis. Say it again.
Therapy. I mean, honestly, without therapy, like I don't think that I would have been able to navigate the year that I've had, the year that I did, and be able to maintain a sanity as well, like a relative adjacent hold on sanity through the year that I've had, because I've had 4 deaths now within my family, since January, right? So, and then being on the status that I am, like I could only be home for like 3 weeks at a time, right? So then that becomes very selective on who funerals are you coming to.
Your visa status.
Yeah. So who funeral are you coming home for? Who, you know what I mean? So And I think those are things that you never really think about as you're growing up and getting older. But we're at that age where, you know, you have to actively start thinking.
Face your mortality.
About that. Yeah. And not just yours, but face the mortality of the people that we never actively think that we're going to lose.
Parents.
Right?
Yeah.
Like facing the idea of, you know, like with my dad passing, thinking about my mom. I'm like, no, we're not going to do that because I will be a mess. Like I'm telling you now, I could be a mess. Like it's just, I would probably need to take 2 months off of work.
Yeah.
Right?
They would have to set up a remote situation for you with that.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I will say that I love my mom in the sense that how she always approached death from a young age, because my grandmother died when I was 5 or something. Mm-hmm. She's never approached death like it's a boogeyman. It's just the inevitability of being a human.
Yeah.
Right? And that's been a very grounding thing to go through grief and to go through death, and then also to help support her as she's losing people and friends and that kind of thing. That this is a reality that we all face as we kind of walk through life. So kind of come to terms with it, make peace with it, but that doesn't erase the sadness, and that's okay.
And that's okay. So my favorite lines. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's great, and that's, I think, a really beautiful, a really honest, a really feeling place to be. And I think that's great that you're allowing yourself to do that. Yay, therapy.
Yay, therapy.
So you work out, you know, so that's definitely
I do
for your mental health, because I keep telling people your mental health and your physical health are inextricably linked. And a lot of people don't understand that. So you can go to the gym all you want, but if you're not taking care of the emotional stuff, it's not going to work, and vice versa. So I'm glad that you're showing that, you know, that link.
Yeah, I think some people, or it's just easy to fall into the idea of using the gym as a substitute for therapy, right? Like it's really easy to fall into that. But like you said, right, it's not the same. It's not a substitute, right? It's a supplement to it.
It's a coping mechanism, and not always the healthiest one.
Not always the healthiest one, right? Because there's extremes with everything, and extremes are not healthy or sustainable for a long period of time.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely correct.
But I do love picking up heavy things and putting it back down. So, yeah.
So she's lifting weights physically, literally and figuratively, right? Good job. Yeah, see what I did there? So you exercise, which is great, and you're actually reaching out, which I also think is great, because for a lot of people, it's hard. For some people, it's difficult to admit openly that I'm not okay and I need some help, I need some support. So it's hard for some people, and then for some people they just can't do that. You know, it's not a thing that they do, maybe because of how they were raised, or for a lot of males, it's just not a thing that we would do.
And then also access too. Like access is also a thing.
No, I don't even mean professionally. I mean like just to a friend.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, access, yes, you're right. Because even though that mental health landscape is changing quite a bit, locally, it's still not where ideally we'd like it to be.
Right.
Which is, one of the reasons we want to have conversations like these to normalize it. So I'm glad that you are reaching out. I'm glad that you are working out. And I'm glad that you are acknowledging your feelings and being honest about them.
I mean, I try. They're annoying sometimes, but
Oh, super annoying. Most annoying. Yeah.
And then I would say, like, it's being a woman, having your period, and then having like weird days.
Yeah.
When that storm hits, you're just like, I'm losing my mind. Like I'm losing my mind.
And then she comes and you're like,
and then you're like, no, it was just
it was just her.
This wench again, right? Which is I think it's also a thing to talk about and to normalize as well. Like that period of you feel just so not yourself, right? And
everything is amplified.
Everything is amplified.
I'm like, I don't understand why this little thing is irritating me so much, or making me cry, and then you're like, oh.
It makes the Princess and the Pea story make more sense, right?
It does. Right? She was definitely PMS. That's what it was.
Exactly, because I understand. I would feel that PT for sure. I would have feel
100 mattresses, and you would feel it.
Exactly. It makes more sense.
It does. So, but I'm really glad that you're able to get to this point, because I know it wasn't always like this.
No.
So I'm very proud of you for getting to this point. Yay you. And hopefully this will also encourage other persons, especially in, I think, a field which is very sport heavy, or athletics heavy, or physical activity heavy, I should say. Because there's also a certain boldness, I think, that a lot of athletes have. Because you have to have mental toughness, right, in order to be able to do what you need to do, and go out there and win, or try to win. A lot of them have that. I think sometimes there's not the emotional aspect of that may be tapped into.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's, the mental toughness that comes with being an athlete, right? And in terms of being in that zone and that kind of thing. And then, that athlete identity, depending on how strong that is for you, like when I tore my ACL the first time, it was, it was traumatic physically, like literally, literal physical trauma. But then also, like, when I look back on it, I was like, I was 15 and I was getting ready to do CXE. I was training for my first like senior women's team cap that I didn't get because, right? So now and then even just the management of it was also just terrible, problematic.
Oh my.
Right, that's another conversation for a different day. But like looking back on it, like my identity as an athlete like was shattered, because now I couldn't walk, like I had to use crutches, right? So then I had to shift so much of, and reconfigure, okay, who am I? What do I do? Like, how do I navigate this? And of course I turned it into, a race. Like I had a crutch Olympics in the cafeteria, like racing down the cafeteria, and then the crutches stuck on the ground and I face planted.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, PhD.
It's because I had that experience when I had a PhD. The concrete floor smacked the sense into my head, right? And that's how we get the PhD, right? Exactly. Ricardo gets it. He understands.
Noted with thanks.
Totally.
Right. But yeah, so even things like injuries and that kind of stuff, like, that does take a strong mental toll on athletes, and then getting back into it, like the like recovering from, for example, like an ACL.
Yeah.
Like
the re-entry.
Right, the physical recovery is easy, like that is programmable, like that kind of thing. But that mental recovery, especially to go back and do the same thing that you did that tore your ACL in the first place,
injured you,
that is really hard. That is really, really hard. And I think we're doing a better job of, with mental health in sports and athletics, to be able to navigate that mental recovery aspect of it. But then also within the pandemic of having to not do sports and not do all of that, right? There within the US, within the NCAA, like you had an uptick in suicides within athletes, right? Because of not just the stress of navigating the collective trauma of COVID, but then now your sport is taken away. And then how do you navigate doing all of that? And then you left. Who are you from a sophomore to a senior that you did not have, right? So it's starting to be a lot better, and I'm glad for that. But, being an athlete isn't always having to be strong. And I think that message is getting louder and louder, which I'm glad for, because I think sometimes as athletes or even former athletes, we just, asking for help sometimes demonized as a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, see, I feel like I was at a really great lecture. This was fantastic. I would come listen to you speak, Doc. I would.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it. I feel like that time just kind of flew. Because we're at the end. Is there anything that you'd like to leave with our viewers and listeners before we close?
I would say, I think the lesson for me this week, that it's okay to just be. Like, it's okay to just literally just sit and just be whatever you feel, wherever you are. It's okay. And it's good to lean into that feeling and then work your way through it. Versus sometimes I think we try to work around it.
That's right.
To get
and the only way out is through.
And the only way out is through. Right? And then the other thing would be, as my cup says, right? You are right where you are meant to be.
Oh,
right?
I needed that.
So that's it. That's all I have.
And you know what? That was pretty darn good. So yeah,
it's that education.
Yeah, that's right. You got that whole education. Right? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to another episode. Season 2 is wild. Another episode of Chit Chat with 2 T's. Thank you to Dr. Kemba Noel-London for being with us today, all the way from the chicken in the car and the car can't go. I appreciate you.
Wow.
I know. I have to bring the culture for the culture. Thank you for being with us. Again, thank you to producer dude Ricardo Mitchell. And again, I am your host, jvaldez. And until we see you next time, take care.